Hey everyone, before we dive into my story, I just want to say thank you for being here. Your support means the world to me. If my story touches you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. It helps more than you know. Now, let's get into it. NTHE, Doctor's voice was a distant echo, a gentle hum beneath the thunder of my own heart. Congratulations, Mama. They're all here. They're all healthy. 7 perfect, tiny daughters. I felt a wave of relief so profound, it almost washed away the exhaustion, the pain, the memory of the last few hours. I turned my head, my eyes searching for my husband, Leo. He was right there, holding my hand, his knuckles white. He had been my rock through the entire ordeal, whispering words of encouragement, wiping the sweat from my brow, his eyes filled with what I thought was love. I squeezed his hand, a weak but grateful gesture. "Leo," I whispered, my voice cracking. "We did it. 7 girls." NHE squeezed back hard. For a moment, I thought it was a gesture of shared joy, a testament to the miracle we had just witnessed. But then I looked at his face. The warmth was gone, replaced by a chilling emptiness. His eyes, which had been soft and loving just moments before, were now cold, hard stones. He let go of my hand, not gently, but as if he had just touched something foul. "Girls," he said, the word dropping into the sterile air of the delivery room like a shard of ice. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. Before I could process the shift, before I could even ask what was wrong, he stood up. The nurses were bustling around, their movements a blur of blue scrubs and gentle efficiency as they tended to my babies in their incubators. I tried to push myself up, my body screaming in protest, my arms aching with a primal need to hold my children. "Leo, help me up," I pleaded. "I want to see them." NHE looked down at me, his expression unreadable, a mask of cold indifference. He extended his hand, the same hand that had held mine, the same hand I thought was a symbol of his love. I reached for it, my fingers finding his. But instead of pulling me up, he pushed. It wasn't a violent shove, not a slap or a punch. It was worse. It was a firm, deliberate, and dismissive press against my shoulder, pushing me back down onto the bed, pinning me there with the weight of his silent contempt. "Stay there," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. "There's nothing for you to see." And then he turned his back on me. He walked over to the window, staring out at the city lights as if the 7 miracles crying just a few feet away, the wife who had just endured hours of labor, didn't exist. In that moment, the physical push was nothing compared to the crushing weight of his rejection. He hadn't just pushed me down, he had pushed me out of his life. His love, which I had believed was the foundation of our world, had vanished the moment our daughters took their first breath. A burning question seared itself into my soul. How could a man who held my hand through the storm of childbirth use that same hand to cast me aside in its aftermath? I knew with a terrifying certainty that this was not just the end of a beautiful moment. It was the beginning of a war, the foundation of a lean. Our love story had been the envy of our friends. I met Leo in college, in a dusty library where he was tutoring younger students in physics. He had a brilliant mind and a laugh that could fill a room. He wasn't just charming, he was kind. He'd bring me soup when I was sick, listen for hours as I talked about my dreams of becoming a landscape artist, and he always made me feel safe. He spoke of family with a reverence that touched me deeply. He wanted a big family, he'd say, a house filled with the sound of running feet and laughter. He painted a picture of our future so vivid and beautiful that I fell in love with the vision as much as I fell in love with him. NHI's parents adored me. They were traditional, yes, but they saw the genuine affection between us. His mother once took my hands in hers and said, "A man shows his true character in how he treats the woman he loves. Leo has a good heart." I believed her. I saw no evidence to the contrary. Every action, every word, every glance was steeped in what I was convinced was unconditional love. When we got married, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The first few years were idyllic. We built a life together, piece by piece. We bought a small house with a yard that I slowly transformed into a garden. Leo's career in finance took off, and he worked hard, but he always came home to me. We were a team. The only thing missing, he'd say with a soft smile, was the sound of little feet. We talked about children endlessly. He was so excited, so specific in his dreams. He wanted a son. My boy, he'd call this imaginary child. I'll teach him to fish, to build things. He'll carry on the family name. I'd smile and nod, caught up in his enthusiasm. I wanted children, boys or girls. It didn't matter to me. I just wanted to be a mother. I never saw his preference for a son as a red flag. In my naivete, I thought it was just a sweet paternal dream, a common wish for a firstborn. I didn't understand that it wasn't a preference. It was a demand. NTHE first sign of trouble was so subtle, I almost missed it. When we started trying to conceive, it didn't happen right away. The months turned into a year, then 2. The easy laughter that had once filled our home was slowly replaced by a quiet tension. Leo became more withdrawn, more irritable. He stopped talking about our future and started making comments that felt like tiny, sharp jabs. "Maybe you should see a doctor," he'd say, his tone implying the fault was mine. My family has no history of problems, and I did see a doctor. I went through invasive tests, hormonal treatments, and the crushing cycle of hope and disappointment month after month. Through it all, Leo's support felt less like a comfort and more like an obligation. He was there physically, but his spirit had retreated. The man who once held my hand through every small trial now sat in waiting rooms, scrolling through his phone, detached and impatient. When we finally conceived through IVF, his joy seemed to return. The smile was back, the warmth in his eyes rekindled. He was attentive again, bringing me cravings in the middle of the night, massaging my aching back. I convinced myself that the last few years had just been a product of stress, a temporary storm that had now passed. I clung to this renewed affection like a lifeline. NTHE doctor told us we were having multiples. We were shocked, then thrilled. At the ultrasound, the technician pointed out the tiny fluttering heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 7. We were speechless. Leo gripped my hand, his eyes wide. 7, he whispered, a huge grin spreading across his face. My own little army. In that moment, I saw the man I first fell in love with. He started planning, talking about expanding the house, about all the things he would teach them. He never once specified him or her. He just said, them. I allowed myself to believe that the number, the sheer miracle of it, had erased his obsession with having a son. I thought our love was finally back on solid ground. I was wrong. It was built on a foundation of lies, and the birth of our daughters was the earthquake that would bring it all crashing down. And the unmasking NTHE days following the birth were a blur of pain, exhaustion, and a profound, soul-crushing emptiness. Leo's behavior in the delivery room was not a momentary lapse. It was the unveiling of his true self. He treated me with a cold, clinical distance, as if I were a stranger, a failed business transaction he was forced to deal with. He spoke only when necessary, his words clipped and devoid of any warmth. He arranged for my discharge from the hospital with the detached efficiency of an assistant, never once meeting my eyes. NHE refused to look at the babies. The nurses would try to show him one of our daughters, her tiny face peeking out from a soft pink blanket, and he would physically turn away. "I'm busy," he'd mutter, pulling out his phone, creating a digital wall between himself and his own children. The nursing staff exchanged worried glances, their professional smiles tightening at the edges. They saw it. Everyone saw it. The man who had entered the hospital as a doting husband had transformed into a monster. NTHE ride home was silent. I sat in the back of the car, a special van he had arranged, surrounded by the 7 car seats holding my precious, sleeping girls. I looked at their faces, each one a perfect miniature of features we shared, and my heart ached with a love so fierce it felt like a physical wound. Then I looked at the back of Leo's head as he drove, his posture rigid, his jaw tight, It was like looking at a stranger. The silence in the car wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, filled with all the things he wasn't saying. When we arrived home, the house felt different. The warmth was gone. He had hired a team of nurses to care for the babies around the clock. "You'll need to recover," he said, the words sounding practical, even thoughtful on the surface. But I knew the truth. It wasn't about my recovery. It was about creating a buffer. He didn't want to be near them, and he didn't want to be near me, the woman who had failed to give him a son. I was relegated to our bedroom, a prisoner in my own home. The nurses, following his strict instructions, would bring the babies to me for feedings, but they would stand by, their presence a constant reminder that I was not in control. Leo never entered the room when the babies were there. He slept in the guest room, and our paths rarely crossed. When they did, he looked through me as if I were glass. Emotional abuse was relentless and insidious. He never raised his voice, he never hit me again, but his cruelty was in his silence, his neglect, his complete and utter erasure of my existence and the existence of our daughters. He would have loud, cheerful phone calls with his business partners in the living room, his laughter echoing through the house, a stark contrast to the dead silence he reserved for his family. He controlled everything: the finances, the household staff, my access to the outside world. I had no car, no access to our bank accounts. He had isolated me completely. One evening, about a month after we came home, I was feeling strong enough to walk around. I went into the nursery, a room we had designed together with such love and excitement. It was now a sterile, clinical space run by strangers. I stood by one of the cribs, watching my daughter Maya sleep. Her tiny chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. I reached in to touch her cheek, and a wave of love so powerful it brought tears to my eyes washed over me. Suddenly, the door opened. It was Leo. He stopped short, his eyes landing on my hand, which was still caressing our daughter's face. A look of pure disgust twisted his features. "Don't," he said, his voice a low hiss. "Don't touch them more than you have to. You'll get them attached." And I recoiled as if he had struck me. "Attached?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Leo, they are my children. I'm their mother. You are the woman who gave birth to them." He corrected me, his voice like ice. "That's all. The nurses will handle the rest." He looked at the 7 cribs, a muscle twitching in his jaw. 7 mistakes. My father was right. I should have chosen a stronger woman. NTHAT was the moment the last vestiges of my love for him died. It wasn't a slow fading. It was a sudden, violent death, leaving nothing but ash and a cold, hard resolve in its wake. The grief was immense, a physical pain in my chest for the man I thought I had married, for the life I thought we would have. But beneath the grief, something else was stirring, a quiet, cold, impatient anger. He thought he had broken me. He thought he had won. He had no idea that he had just created his worst enemy. I looked at my 7 daughters, my 7 perfect, beautiful mistakes, and I made a silent vow. I would not just survive this. I would find a way to be free, and I would make him pay for every moment of this cruelty. The war had begun, and I would be the one to finish it. The secret rebellion NMY prison was gilded. From the outside, it looked like a perfect life, a beautiful home, a wealthy husband, a team of professionals to help with our 7 newborns. But inside, I was suffocating. Leo had systematically stripped me of my autonomy, my identity, and my connection to the outside world. He believed he had me trapped, a bird with clipped wings in a cage of his own design. But he underestimated me. He mistook my silence for submission, my grief for weakness. He didn't realize that in the quiet darkness of my isolation, I was forging a weapon, a plan. NMY rebellion started small, in secret acts of defiance that he would never notice. He had forbidden me from being too involved with the babies, so I became a ghost in my own home. I learned the nurses, schedules, their routines, the exact moments when their attention would be elsewhere. In the dead of night, when the house was still and Leo was asleep in his separate room, I would creep into the nursery. The room was kept dimly lit, and I would move from crib to crib, a silent specter of maternal love. I couldn't hold them for long, for fear of one of them crying and alerting the night nurse. So I would just stand there, my hand resting on each tiny back, feeling the warmth of their bodies, the rhythm of their breath. I would whisper to them, my voice barely a sound. I told them their names: Anaya, Brielle, Chloe, Dahlia, Ilara, Freya, and Giselle. I told them they were loved, that they were strong, that they were miracles. I would hum the lullabies my own mother had sung to me, ancient melodies of comfort and protection. These stolen moments were my lifeline. They were sips of water in a vast desert, reminding me what I was fighting for. My greatest ally was one of the nurses, a woman named Clara. She was older, with kind eyes that saw more than she let on. Unlike the others, who were brisk and professional, Clara moved with a quiet compassion. She saw the way I looked at my daughters, the hunger in my eyes. She saw the way Leo ignored me, the cold contempt in his gaze. She didn't pry, but one night, as she was preparing a bottle, she spoke to me in a low voice. "They are beautiful children," she said, looking directly at me. "They have your eyes." It was a simple statement, but it was an offering of solidarity. It was the first kind word I had heard from a stranger in weeks. I took a risk. "He hates them," I whispered, the confession tearing from my throat. "He hates me for having them." Clara didn't act surprised. She simply nodded, her expression softening with empathy. "Some men are fools," she said. "They mistake treasure for stone." From that day on, Clara became my co-conspirator. She would create distractions, allowing me precious extra minutes with my girls. She would forget to log a feeding, letting me be the one to give a bottle. She would tell me stories about each of my daughters, budding personalities, how Anaya had a powerful cry, how Ilara was a peaceful sleeper, how Freya would grip her finger with surprising strength. She fed me information about my own children, details Leo's regime was designed to deny me. Clara also became my link to the outside world. I had no phone, no internet access. Leo had made sure of that, but Clara had a smartphone. I need to learn. I told her one night, my voice filled with a desperate urgency. "He controls all the money. I don't know anything about our finances, his business. If I'm ever going to get them out of here, I need to be smart." NSO, our secret lessons began. Late at night, in the quiet of the nursery, Clara would pull up articles and videos on her phone. I devoured information on divorce law, child custody, financial forensics, and asset hiding. I, the art student who once dreamed of painting landscapes, was now studying the intricate, ugly world of corporate finance and marital law. I learned about shell corporations, offshore accounts, and the tactics wealthy men use to hide money from their spouses. Every piece of information was a stone, and I was building a fortress, brick by painstaking brick. Leo remained oblivious. He saw me as a defeated woman, a ghost haunting the hallways of his perfect house. He had no idea that the ghost was watching, learning, and planning. He was so blinded by his own arrogance and disappointment that he couldn't see the rebellion brewing right under his nose. He thought the silence in the house was the sound of his victory, but it was the sound of me sharpening my claws. And the first crack in the armor NFOR. 2 years, I lived a double life. By day, I was the subdued, broken wife Leo wanted me to be. I was quiet, unobtrusive, and followed the rules of my gilded cage. By night, I was a student, a strategist, a mother gathering her strength. My daughters were growing. They were toddlers now, their personalities blossoming. They were 7 unique, vibrant little girls who knew my face from stolen moments and my love from whispered promises in the dark. They were my everything, the fuel for my silent, burning rage. NTHE turning point, the first real crack in Leo's armor, came from an unexpected source, his own mother. Elena had always been kind to me, but she was fiercely loyal to her son. After the girls were born, her visits became less frequent. I could see the confusion and disappointment in her eyes, a reflection of her son's feelings. She had bought into his narrative that I had somehow failed, that our house was a place of sorrow instead of joy. One afternoon, she arrived unannounced. Leo was at work, and the head nurse, a stern woman loyal to Leo, was out on an errand. Clara was on duty. It was a rare opportunity. Elena found me in the garden, a place I had started tending to again, my one sanctioned escape. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of pity and concern. "You're so thin, dear," she said. "Are you eating?" "I'm fine, Elena," I said, my voice even. I had learned to mask my emotions perfectly. "Leo worries," she continued, though her words lacked conviction. "He says you're distant, that you haven't bonded with the girls." And a cold fury washed over me, but I kept my face serene. This was his story, that I was the cold one, the unnatural mother who couldn't connect with her own children. He was painting me as the villain to justify his own monstrous behavior. It was a calculated, cruel lie. At that moment, Clara appeared at the back door, a silent signal in her eyes. It was now or never. "Elena," I said, my voice dropping, gaining a new strength. "There is something you need to see, not what Leo has told you, but the truth." And I led her inside, my heart pounding. I took her to the nursery, where my 7 daughters were playing. They were beautiful. Anaya was trying to build a tower of blocks, her brow furrowed in concentration. Chloe and Dahlia were reading a picture book together, babbling in their own secret language. When they saw me, their faces lit up. "Mama!" a chorus of tiny voices cried out, and they all toddled towards me, their arms outstretched. And I knelt on the floor, and I was instantly swarmed. They climbed into my lap, hugged my neck, patted my cheeks with their small hands. The love in that room was tangible, a radiant, undeniable force. I looked up at Elena, whose face had gone pale. Her eyes darted from the joyous scene in front of her to my face, and for the first time, she saw the truth. She saw the deep, unconditional love between a mother and her children. She saw that the story her son had been feeding her was a complete fabrication. "He told me, he said you wouldn't touch them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He doesn't allow me to," I said quietly, my voice thick with unshed tears. "He calls them his 7 mistakes. He hired the nurses to keep me away from them. The only moments I have with my own daughters are stolen." NTHE color drained from Elena's face. The carefully constructed world of her son's righteousness shattered in an instant. She looked at her granddaughters, truly looked at them, and saw not mistakes, but miracles. She saw the pieces of her own family in their tiny faces. She reached out a trembling hand and stroked Freya's hair. Freya looked up at her and gave her a brilliant, toothy smile. And in that moment, Elena's loyalty shifted. The love for her son was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce, grandmotherly protective instinct and the cold, hard realization that he had become a man she didn't recognize. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a dawning horror and a new, steely resolve. "What he is doing is a sin," she said, her voice low and shaking with anger. "This ends. Now." Leo came home that evening to find his mother waiting for him in the living room. I was in my room, but I could hear the confrontation. Elena's voice, usually so gentle, was sharp and accusatory. I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard phrases like, "How could you?" and "They are your children," and "This is not how I raised you." Leo's responses were defensive, then angry. The argument escalated, their voices rising until the whole house seemed to vibrate with their fury. It was the first time anyone had challenged him. It was the first time his perfect, controlled world had been breached. He had lost his most important ally. When Elena left that night, she stopped by my room. She didn't say much. She just took my hand, squeezed it, and said, "Be strong. You are not alone in this anymore." I knew then that I had gained more than just an ally. I had gained a witness. Leo's armor had cracked, and I was ready to shatter it completely. The gathering storm, Elena's confrontation with Leo, was a declaration of war. The Cold War in our house turned hot overnight. Leo was furious, not just at his mother, but at me. He knew, somehow, that I was responsible for her change of heart. His emotional neglect intensified into a palpable, simmering rage that filled every corner of our home. He fired Clara, accusing her of, quote, insubordination, a clear message to me that my secret lines of communication were being cut. He installed cameras in the nursery and the main hallways, telling me they were for the children's safety, but I knew they were for surveillance. They were for me. NHE had intended to isolate me further, to reassert his control. But he had made a critical error. He had underestimated his own mother. Elena, now armed with the truth, became my secret weapon. She couldn't fight him head-on. He would just cut her off completely. So she fought him with subtlety and cunning, skills I was coming to appreciate. NSHE began visiting regularly, under the guise of grandmotherly duty. Leo couldn't refuse her without causing a larger family scandal, so he allowed it, his jaw tight with resentment. During these visits, while she played with her granddaughters in the living room, in full view of the cameras, she would pass me information. A slip of paper with a lawyer's name and number tucked into a grocery bag. A quiet whisper about a financial advisor who specialized in forensic accounting. She became my eyes and ears, my courier, my general in a war Leo didn't even know I was fighting. Using a prepaid burner phone Elena had smuggled to me, I made the call. The lawyer she recommended, a woman named Ms. Anya Sharma, was sharp, discreet, and utterly ruthless when it came to protecting women and children. Our first conversation was short and cryptic, but we established a plan. We would communicate through a secure email address, which I could only access on a small, hidden tablet Elena had also provided. NTHE next year was a whirlwind of clandestine activity. While Leo was at work, I became a detective in my own home. He thought the cameras would control me, but they became my guide. I learned their blind spots. I knew exactly where I could stand in his home office to be out of view. While the girls napped, under the watchful eye of the new, stern nurse, I would slip into his office. My heart hammered against my ribs every time. I had minutes, sometimes only seconds, to find what I needed, and I photographed documents with my hidden tablet. Bank statements, investment portfolios, deeds to properties I never knew he owned. I found evidence of offshore accounts and shell corporations, just like I had studied. He was hiding millions. It was a complex, tangled web of deceit, designed to be impenetrable. But I had time, and I had a motivation more powerful than greed, the freedom of my 7 daughters. And I would upload the photos to the secure email, and Ms. Sharma and her team would get to work, piecing together the puzzle of Leo's hidden empire. With each document I found, our case grew stronger. Ms. Sharma was building an arsenal of financial evidence that would be undeniable in court. Nalina, for her part, played her role perfectly. She started documenting everything. She kept a detailed journal of Leo's behavior, his coldness towards the children, his controlling nature towards me. She recorded conversations, capturing his dismissive, cruel remarks about his daughters. She gathered a war chest of emotional evidence to complement my financial discoveries. NTHE storm was gathering, growing more powerful with each secret piece of information we uncovered. Leo felt this shift in the atmosphere. He grew more paranoid, more controlling. He started coming home early, trying to catch me off guard, but I was always one step ahead. By the time he walked through the door, I was back in my role as the quiet, subdued wife, sitting in the garden or reading a book. He could feel that he was losing control, but he couldn't figure out how. The powerlessness drove him mad. He was a king who sensed a rebellion in his castle, but couldn't find the traitors. He never once looked at the woman he had dismissed as broken. He never thought to look at me, the final betrayal and the trap-in THE final piece of the puzzle, the one that would ensure Leo's complete and utter downfall, was not something I went looking for. It fell into my lap, a piece of cosmic justice delivered by his own arrogance. NHE had started taking business trips more frequently. I knew they were lies. Elena had confirmed through family gossip that his company wasn't sending him anywhere. He was seeing someone. In the past, this knowledge would have shattered me. Now, it was merely a strategic advantage. I didn't care about his infidelity on a personal level anymore. He had killed that part of me long ago. But I knew it was a weapon. Miss Sharma had told me that while infidelity might not hold much legal weight in a no-fault divorce, the financial implications of it could be explosive. If he was spending marital assets on another woman, that was something a judge would care about very much. One evening, he was packing for another one of his trips. He was on the phone, his back to me, his voice low and intimate. He thought I was in the girls' room, but I was standing silently in the hallway, in the shadow of an archway. "I know, my love," he was saying. "Just a few more months. I'm handling the situation here. Once it's resolved, we can finally be together. I'll see you tomorrow." NHE hung up and turned, and for a split second, our eyes met. He didn't see me, not really. His mind was elsewhere, with his other life, his real life. He walked right past me, oblivious. But in that brief moment, I saw his phone screen light up with a notification. It was a confirmation for a jewelry purchase. A very expensive one, a diamond necklace, and beneath it, a delivery address, an address in our city, and MY blood ran cold. It was one thing to know he was cheating. It was another to see the proof, the casual way he was spending the money that should have been securing our daughters' futures on a gift for his mistress. This was the final betrayal. I memorized the address. As soon as he left, I looked it up on the tablet. It was a luxury apartment building downtown. With a little more digging, using the skills I had honed over the past year, I found her name, a younger woman, an associate at his firm. I found her social media profiles, which were public. They were filled with pictures of lavish gifts, expensive dinners, and exotic vacations, all time-stamped during his, quote, business trips. He wasn't just having an affair, he was funding an entire lifestyle for her, using our money, and I sent everything to Miss Sharma. The address, the name, the social media profiles, the information about the necklace. I could almost hear the sharp intake of her breath through the email. "This is it," she wrote back. "This is the kill shot. He's using marital funds to support a mistress. This moves from a simple divorce to a case of financial dissipation. We have him. Are you ready?" And I was ready. We set the trap. NTHE plan was simple, but brutal. Miss Sharma, armed with the mountain of evidence we had collected, filed for an emergency court order. It was an ex parte motion, meaning Leo wouldn't be notified until it was already done. The motion requested a temporary restraining order, full custody of the children for me, and an immediate freeze of all his known assets, pending a full financial investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. The financial deceit, the emotional abuse documented by his own mother, the surveillance footage showing his neglect of the children, and now the blatant dissipation of marital assets on his mistress. NTHE day the trap was sprung, I felt a strange sense of calm. Leo was on one of his trips, shacked up in the luxury apartment with his other life. He had no idea that his world was about to be dismantled. NTHE court order was granted. That afternoon, a team of people arrived at my house. It wasn't a raid, but an orderly, legal takeover. There was Ms. Sharma, a court-appointed forensic accountant, and 2 sheriff's deputies to serve the papers and ensure a peaceful transition. The nurses Leo had hired were dismissed, their contracts terminated. The cameras were disabled, and I stood in the living room, the legal documents in my hand, and for the first time in years, I breathed freely in my own home. The air felt lighter. The silence was no longer oppressive, it was peaceful. My girls, sensing the shift, were calm and happy, playing at my feet. Leo would be served at his office the next morning. He would walk in, king of his castle, and find that his kingdom had been seized, his assets frozen, his reputation about to be incinerated. The trap was set. The king was about to be checkmated, and I, the ghost he had created, was about to become a queen. Justice and a new dawn in THE aftermath was everything I had planned for and more. Leo was served with the court order at his office, in front of his partners and employees. The public humiliation was the first blow. The discovery that his bank accounts, his credit cards, and his investment portfolios were all frozen was the second. He was, for the first time in his adult life, powerless. NHE tried to fight it, of course. He hired an expensive legal team and came at me with everything he had. He accused me of being an unfit mother, of being mentally unstable, of conspiring with his mother to steal his money. But his accusations were hollow, his rage impotent against the mountain of evidence we had compiled. For every lie he told, Miss Sharma presented a document, a photograph, a recording that proved the truth. His own mother testified against him, her voice shaking but firm as she detailed his years of cruelty and neglect. The jewelry, the apartment, the lavish vacations for his mistress, it all came out. He was exposed not just as a cruel husband and father, but as a liar and a cheat. NTHE judge was not impressed with him. In the end, the divorce settlement was a stunning victory. I was granted full legal and physical custody of our 7 daughters. He was given supervised visitation twice a month in a public place. He was ordered to pay substantial child support, calculated based on the full extent of his wealth that our forensic accountant had uncovered. The house, our family home, was awarded to me. The court divided the remaining assets, and because he had been found guilty of dissipating marital funds on his affair, I was awarded a significantly larger share. He was financially ruined, but more than that, his reputation was destroyed. His business partners forced him out. His friends abandoned him. He was a pariah in the community he had once dominated. The man who had been so obsessed with his name and his legacy had nothing left. NTHE day the divorce was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunshine, holding my head high. Elena was there, and she wrapped me in a fierce hug. "It's over," she whispered. "You're free." And I was. Free from fear, free from control, free from the suffocating weight of his hatred. Our home, once a prison, transformed into a sanctuary. I filled it with laughter, with art, with music. My daughters thrived. They grew up knowing nothing but love and security, their home a fortress of warmth and acceptance. They were bright, funny, and compassionate young women, each one a testament to the power of a mother's love. And I never saw Leo again. He attended a few of the supervised visits, his eyes filled with a bitter, resentful anger, but he couldn't connect with the daughters he had never known. Eventually, he just stopped coming. He faded from our lives, a ghost of a memory, a cautionary tale. Sometimes, late at night, after my girls are asleep, I stand in the quiet of our home and think about the man who held my hand during childbirth and then used it to push me to the floor. I don't feel anger anymore, or even pity. I just feel a quiet sense of gratitude. His cruelty was the catalyst for my transformation. He tried to break me, but instead, he forged me into something stronger than he could ever imagine. He thought he was casting me into darkness, but he was the one who led me to the dawn. NMY name is Sarah, and this is my story. It's a story of betrayal, but it's also a story of resilience. It's a story about how the deepest wounds can lead to the greatest strength, and how justice, sometimes, is not about revenge, but about building a beautiful life on the ashes of the one that was stolen from you. And I did, for me and for my 7